Welcome to the Story Learning Podcast, regular doses of language learning tips and motivation to help you become fluent in any language. With me, Olly Richards. For language programs, books, free resources, and much more, visit StoryLearning.com. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the I Will Teach You a Language podcast. Hope you're having a wonderful day. My name is Olly Richards, and this podcast is all about language learning. I answer your questions about all things related to language learning. Over 400 episodes now, so there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of questions have been answered over the years. So feel free to keep sending them through. You can send me questions to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/ask, and I'll be happy to help you out with that. Now, today we've got a very interesting guest, and I am speaking with a bit of an enigma. Her name is Aletta Mazlin, and she is the woman behind a series of really, really great language websites, and you will almost certainly have seen these websites if you've ever kind of searched around for stuff on the internet. She runs the websites which are called the French Experiment, the Italian Experiment, the Spanish Experiment, and the German Project. And she's also working on something now called the Fable Cottage. And if you've seen these, what you will know that these are absolutely delightful sites which create bilingual stories for language learners. And they are, the thing about her website is that they look absolutely gorgeous. I love just being on those websites. And also the content is also all based on stories with great illustrations, videos, and audio. I've always been fascinated by, well, I didn't know who it was originally. I didn't know who Aletta was, but I do now. I've got to speak. In fact, this is a world exclusive because this is the first podcast she's ever done. And so if you are interested in this, then you're going to really enjoy this conversation. We talk about two things mainly. We talk about learning with stories and how stories, why she teaches with stories, how you can learn with stories. This kind of element will be familiar to you, but we also talk about creating stuff and creating projects with your languages, because I'm a big believer in that there are so many possibilities out there, so many things that we can do with our languages. You don't have to just look for jobs which use languages. You can create your own stuff. This is obviously what I've done with my publishing business. But Aletta, as you'll hear in this interview, she just began all these websites, and now she's done wonderful things. She didn't have to do that. She, as a self-starter, she decided to do it. And so if you're someone that's looking for inspiration for things to do professionally with your languages, then you're going to enjoy this as well. So I think that's quite enough from me. Without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Aletta Mazlin of the fablecottage.com. So Aletta, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me, Olly.
Now, I've been I was telling you off just before we hit record over here that I've been a huge fan of your work with languages for years and years, even though I didn't know exactly who you were, because you have all these fantastic websites which we'll talk about, but you let the websites do the talking. You're not like me, who has needs to kind of splash his face over everything that he does. And so, but perhaps just to begin, before we get into all of that, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your background with languages and your interest in languages.
Well, I have 5 websites now. It's kind of like saying I have 5 children. I have 5 websites based around languages. They all kind of came about by accident. I don't actually have a strong background in languages. I've done a lot of traveling. I have been awkward in various countries trying to speak words out of a phrase book, and I've half-heartedly tried to learn a bunch of them over the years. Usually it relates to the length of time that I dated the guy, and then it stops after that. But my background in making these language learning websites came about kind of by accident. So I was learning, the very first one I made is the FrenchExperiment.com, and I was learning French at the time. And I've been studying in these textbooks, I've been, these verb tables and conjugations, and I felt like I've been studying for ages, and I felt like surely I must be able to understand something by now. And I tried to read some materials, some stories on the internet. This was back in 2008, so the internet was a bit of a desolate wasteland. And I tried to read some material, and it was just too difficult, too horrible. And the other thing that was happening was I was working for this company that taught people how to I'm going to do little air quotes here, make money online by making these websites full of content that you put ads on and then, make a bit of money kind of thing. And I was writing the lessons for this at the time, sort of paraphrasing my boss and doing these things. And I felt a bit weird because I'd never actually done it myself. So I put two and two together, and I decided to build a website around French language learning because it would help me learn my French. It would help me learn how to build these websites. It might make me a bit of money so that I can pay off my horrible credit card debt from all this traveling. So I sort of remembered this experience I had with trying to read some material in French and trying to listen to some material in French, and it just wiped straight over me, and it was so demoralizing. And so I thought, what if I made some nice little, fairy tales you think would be really easy, but when you try to read the original versions, they're absolutely horrible. So how about I make some nice, easy ones, record them, put them on the internet. We'll do some lessons. We'll do some, product reviews. We'll put some ads on, ... profit. That was the plan. That's how it all started. And it didn't quite work like that. So I wrote my own version of Little Red Riding Hood was my very first story. And I had I was fortunate enough to have a French-speaking Belgian guy sleeping on my floor. I was very active in the couch surfing community in Christchurch at the time. And so he translated it for me, and he recorded it into my little MacBook with its GarageBand and a bit of tissue over the microphone to stop the plosive sounds. He made a little bit of music on his guitar, and we put it up on the internet. And it was kind of like, ooh, when's the money going to start coming in? And no, it didn't work like that. It was very slow to take off, but it was kind of the start of that. I started to see how much people really enjoyed the stories and the websites. After a few years, I decided to make an Italian version. Then I made a Spanish version, and the last one I made was a German version. And you can kind of see the progression of my skills as we go along. The French one was the first. It's the FrenchExperiment.com. Oh, I called it the French Experiment because it was an experiment, of course. I was like, will this even work? Who knows? And the next one was the ItalianExperiment.com. Then there was the SpanishExperiment.com. You see where I'm going with this. And the last one was the GermanProject.com. So you can take a look at those. They've still got the original stories up there, and you can sort of see where it all started. And like throughout all of this, the most popular content on the websites was always these bilingual fairy tales that we made. So we got the fairy tales, they got them translated into the language. We have these little parallel text with the English translation underneath that you can listen to. We get voice artists to do horrible things, speaking extremely slowly. It must be so painful. So we get them to do that. And these pieces of content were always just so well received, and I would get so many lovely emails from people all over the world. And around 2018, I sort of thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if I could build an entire website based around these stories? And if, people love these stories when they're free, maybe they'll, give me just a little bit of money to keep making them. So this could be my dream job, where I'm just writing stories and drawing pictures and doing, silly animations and playing with music and voice and learning about languages. I thought that would be wonderful. So I built the Fable Cottage, which is all stories. We do French, Italian, Spanish, and German. We've got 11 stories up there at the moment. And that's been my latest adventure, and sort of been plodding along and learning a bit of the language at the same time. And it's really interesting.
That is, there's so many things I want to ask you. I don't even know where to begin, but I mean, just
sorry, I didn't even pause to take breath.
No, but that's brilliant, because that's painted the picture. I have to ask, first of all, what the German project, was that because the GermanExperiment.com was already taken?
No, I got the GermanExperiment.com, but I found that nasty things show up when you type in German experiment. So I didn't really want to be associated with that.
Right. Okay. Yes. Fair enough. All right. Then. Well, moving swiftly on. So the French experiment, then, that you began this in 2008. Did I hear that? Did I hear that right?
Yes. Yeah.
And one of the things, I spend a lot of time kind of working with creators and entrepreneurs and things like that. And one of the things which comes up over and over again is that for people who want to kind of who want to do things with their creativity, with their languages, with their skills, that one of the most important things is just to give it time and be consistent and not stop. You know, and I see so many people who kind of who want to create something in the world, and they demand success now, but actually so much of the success of projects is a result of just not giving up and just sticking with it over time, a lot like languages actually. And often the reason is because things take time to build up, but also you learn things along the way, and a bit like you said that, you know, your website worked out nothing like you expected, but you stuck at it long enough to be able to say, okay, maybe we should try this, and then maybe we try a bit of that, and try something a little bit different. So I think it's great that you've been doing this for so long. And what I also like is the fact that you're combining skills, because something I think about a lot, and I forget who said this, it's probably something that lots of people say. And in the future, I'm probably going to start saying that I said it or something, but it's the idea that
Why not?
Why not? People, you know, apparently Mark Twain said pretty much everything that
Nobody will remember.
on the internet.
It's all right. I'll quote you.
Yeah. And it's the idea that, you know, being great at one skill is obviously a great thing, but it's even more useful to be quite good at two skills, because then you can combine them in a certain way. And so often one of the things that happens with language learners is that they get very, very, they treat languages as almost like a sacred cow, to the point where they only want to talk about they take a very purist approach to language learning. But actually, the people that I see who are successful in creating things in the world are often combining two skills. And in your case, what you described was combining your kind of knowledge of how things work on the internet with languages, and you did that to create something that became super successful. So I found that very interesting as well. I want to ask you about stories, because I don't know how much you know about what we do here at Story Learning, but basically everything we do is with stories, with books and courses and things like that. So I'm really curious to know, to ask you about how you came up with this idea. So was there anything in particular about stories that made you want to start a website about stories? Because I imagine it's not the most obvious thing to do from an internet perspective.
It seemed really obvious to me, having, you know, tried to learn the material the traditional way. It just seemed like the obvious step for me was to try to read some material, and I assumed that I wouldn't understand everything. There would be pieces that I didn't, but that I would, you know, then be able to go off and research these little bits or try to understand why they were like that, and it would all sort of come together in a lovely little whole. Sorry, what was the question again?
Why stories?
Why stories? The thing with stories, I don't know. How good are you at remembering song lyrics?
Pretty good, actually.
Pretty good, me too. So I wonder if our brains are different. I'm not sure. But for me, stories have this tremendous ability to pull things out of my memory, and it seems like a storage structure, like a schema, like an architecture kind of thing. Like it's not just a jumble of sentences like you'd learn in a textbook, or even, you know, a conversation that you'd memorize or go through in a podcast or anything like that. It's a beginning, it's a middle, it's an end. It's the music that ties it all together. It's the tone of the voice artist's voice that tells you what's going on. It's all these things that help you to make strong connections between the language and, you know, what's going on, and figure out what is happening. And it's just so much easier for me to comprehend and remember the material in that context. I think there was one point where I listened to my stories over and over and over and over again. So they do kind of take on the quality of a really, you know, a song that you know really well, and you can just sing the whole word. You know, you might not know that you know all the words when you first start, but as soon as like that first couple of sentences or first couple of words come in, you're singing along, and it all like activates the rest of it as it goes along. And I find the same with stories. You start me off with Once Upon a Time, and I can sort of like say the rest of the story as it goes along. And I don't think you can do that with other kinds of material. There's something about the stories that just makes it easier to store and retrieve.
I always like to say that stories are like a language that we already have in common, because there are certain types of people say there are 7 types of plot, and every story is kind of a variation on one of those 7 types of plots. And but
hero's journey and well,
yeah, exactly, the hero's journey, things like that. And so to a large extent, if you tell a story, a love story or an adventure story, we kind of already know what's going to happen in that story, or the basic principle of it. So we're kind of starting with a common language, and then we're kind of just mapping on the words and phrases and grammar of the foreign language onto that thing that we already understand. So I think it's absolutely true. And but you talked about kind of writing your own stories and doing your own illustrations as well. And I love this image of you sitting there with that. Was it French or Belgian? You said that guy out the couch surfing
Belgian.
guy.
Yeah.
Belgian. I love the image of you sort of sitting there in your apartment with this Belgian guy doing recordings and translating stuff, because that is that's how so many great projects start. You have an idea, and then you kind of call in a friend, and you're like, "Can you just help me do this and translate that, and just record this little thing for me?" And you kind of, I can see you guys there doing exactly that. But tell me a bit about the stories, because the website is called The Fable Cottage, and as I understand it, that's a collection of stories from the various single language websites. Is that right?
They're mostly new ones. There are a couple that cross over, but they are the ones that are on the Fable Cottage are not on the other website. Yep.
Okay. And so tell me about the stories across the different websites. So I know you said that you rewrote Little Red Riding Hood. So what was your approach here? Are you taking existing old fairy tales, or are you rewriting them, or are you writing stories from scratch?
So, like, I don't know if you've ever read the like original versions of some of these fairy tales, but they are pretty weird and pretty horrific. So what we do is we take the the fairy tales that you know and love. A lot of times they've been sanitized by Disney, so it's already pretty safe, and we rewrite them in part to add more useful learning material, more useful vocabulary, different items of clothing and things like that would be useful. In part, it is to straighten out the weirdness, like the weird gender roles and the horrific kind of happenings that are just a bit strange in today's world. Sometimes it's because you sit there and you wonder, really, why was the Queen in Snow White so obsessed with being the most beautiful in the world? What did it really matter to her? And you kind of just asking yourself, you're like, this doesn't make a very satisfying, sense to me. So I will rewrite them to add that kind of satisfying conclusion or satisfying plot, to push my own agenda of just, being nice and being kind, all these things, and also just to make them a bit original and a bit more entertaining. There's also a lot of humor to be had, I think, in subverting what is expected from the fairy tales. I really like to occasionally chuck in, I call it a technology bomb. It's like you're living in this old fairy tale world, and then suddenly there's a dishwasher for some reason, and that just tickles me so much. I laugh at my own jokes. It's very embarrassing, but yeah, we just tweak the stories to make them entertaining and satisfying and enjoyable for everybody, for all ages, while still sticking reasonably close to the plot that you know and love. I think sometimes people don't realize how much we've tweaked them, and that's fine as well. I can be the canon version. That's okay.
Yeah, I love this idea of adding in these little Easter eggs into the plot, because also it keeps people alert. As they're reading, there's always a kind of a danger with fairy tales, I guess, or fables, and that you kind of know what's going to happen, and so so there's a danger of tuning out, I guess. But if you see like that Snow White's got an iPhone or something, you're gonna.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but dishwasher, absolutely. The joke at the end, I don't know if anybody wants to tune out. This is spoilers. The joke at the end is that the prince has seen how much the dwarfs hate washing dishes, so he buys them all a dishwasher, and then everybody lives happily ever after, because that's exactly what you need to live happily ever after.
Yeah, my dishwasher's broken at the moment, and it's in fact my dishwasher and my microwave
my God,
broke in the same week. So it's like a total lifestyle change.
It's like the 70s or something. I don't know.
It is. I've got to like plan 40 minutes ahead so I can cook something in the oven rather than like the 6 minutes it takes in the microwave. So yeah,
You're going to appreciate it so much when it's back. You're gonna soften so much butter. Yeah.
yeah. So these little things here, from a story writing perspective, like those little things are what, for me anyway, this is what sticks in people's minds. And when I get these emails from people saying, I love this such and such a story, it's often because we've taken the time to actually put in that little bit of extra creativity, which just brings it brings it into a slightly new dimension. And one of my big pet peeves with the world of graded readers, which is a lot of what I work in, is that they're so damn boring. And people,
oh my God,
just take these. I don't know what I don't know. It just seems so. It always seems so obvious to me that if you're Penguin or or Oxford or whoever else makes these graded readers, why is it always 200-year-old stories that are out of copyright that you just kind of rehash with a really old looking pencil drawing on the front? I mean, why not make it modern and interesting? It just seems like the most obvious thing in the world to me. And so I think when people who do the sort of things that we do actually put this kind of love, and it's obviously been thought through, and there's been care and attention that's gone into the creation of this. Readers really appreciate it.
One of my big theories with language learning is that you need to, motivation is your biggest motivation and enthusiasm are your biggest currencies. You don't want to waste that. And as we're creating resources for language learners, we need to help keep them, with this motivation going on. Oh, my words have just abandoned me. It's after dinner. So we need to keep that motivation going. And you can't do that if the story is boring. If you're reading a boring story, you're just going to tune out. You are just going to, give up. You're not going to want to listen to it over and over again or read it over and over again. It's boring. So this is part of the reason why I try to make the stories entertaining and engaging and funny, and the kind of thing that you will want to listen to over and over again without wanting to, put your head in a microwave, which is not functioning, kind of thing.
Or dishwasher.
Yeah, and do put that love into it. I get people asking me when I'm going to put out more stories, and I don't know if they realize how long it takes me to make each one, because I am putting so much love and attention into each one. Each one's like this little nugget of art. If I don't know, makes me sound.
Are you writing the stories yourself at this stage?
So I work with writers. I work with a linguist. It's kind of like a collaborative effort. It's really frustrating for my writers because they'll produce something and then I'll completely rewrite it myself and then send it back to them and say, okay, now make this good for language learners again. Poor writers. But yeah, I do a lot of the writing myself. They'll give me something and I'll be like, how about we do this? How about we do that? How about we, tweak this or make this person say this thing or all that kind of stuff. Yeah, frustrating. Yeah.
And tell me about these illustrations, because one of the things that I love about your websites is that they look so beautiful. And I just want to just hug these websites because they look so nice. And so, tell me about the illustrations, and because you mentioned before that you were doing illustrations yourself. So tell me, do you do them yourself? Has it always been that way? I mean, do you work with designers now? Tell me how that's worked out.
It's always been me doing the illustrations. So I have a background in graphic design, and one of the components that we did in graphic design was we had to illustrate this children's book, and I discovered that I was actually quite good at that. And I've always been good at drawing and stuff, but I've never really taken it seriously because I was doing geography and history and I don't know, things like that at school. And when it came to these stories, I knew that I needed some pictures. I tried to get illustrators on board, but I just keep running into problems with, copyright and, what exactly I could do with that content afterwards. So I was like, I'll just do it myself. So you can see the progression of my illustration skills if you're eagle-eyed. I think I started with Hansel and Gretel. And my most recent one would be the Bird and the Whale, which I just recently refreshed. But it's really satisfying for me because it's something that I love doing, and I get to do it now. Even though I'm not, an official proper illustrator, I get to do it for myself. I've essentially made a job for myself doing this. So yeah, I really enjoy that.
That's fantastic, and I also think it's wonderful that you've kind of retained this creative element in what you do. One of the challenges that I've had is, as my business has grown is that I've kind of gone through these phases of, yeah, because as we do, because we tend to do far too much stuff all the time. We're always kind of putting out new books and courses and programs and things like that. And over time, my kind of role is, because I started off just with a blog. I started my blog in
Mm.
2013, and I just wrote blog posts about my ideas on language learning, and it was always that creativity that I most valued. That's why I started it in the first place. But as time has gone on, and we've kind of built a team of people who now do everything far better than I could do, I've kind of become further and further removed from the creative aspect, and
Yeah.
that's a bit of a problem for me, because that's the thing that I really thrive on, and it's what gives me energy. So I think it's fantastic that you're still so in touch with that element of what you're doing.
I feel like that's the struggle that I'm kind of wrestling with at the moment. As the Fable Cottage becomes more and more popular, there's more demand for more stories, and I'm trying to push them out. But it's really just me doing the writing, and there's lots of backwards and forwards, and then drawing all the pictures and doing all the animation. I am the massive roadblock, so it becomes a decision whether I want this to be like a big enterprise, a big business, and grow that way, or whether I want it to be like my art, the thing that brings meaning into my life and is just a joy for me to do. It's kind of like, can you find a balance? I don't know. So yeah, I haven't yet outsourced the things that I really enjoy. I've made a list of the things that I can outsource and push those things away. But I think the writing and the illustration and stuff are the ones that I'm going to keep, because I just freaking love it.
It is a big consideration for content creators, I think, because it does have a very big impact on you psychologically once you as your role changes, and everything. I really believe that everything becomes a job in the end, and so for us to, you can have a small business, you can have a big business, like you can do anything you want, you can create anything you want. But I think, one of the things I've been thinking about a lot recently is that, life's really too short to not be spending the time doing the stuff that you really want to do. There's a great
Do the
book.
things you love, Ollie.
Yeah,
Do the things you love.
absolutely. And that's actually one of the reasons that I've started doing YouTube again recently, because I've never really taken YouTube very seriously, but I just had this realization that if I'm not actively creating content about language learning, then I don't feel like I'm doing good work. So I've kind of been spending my time making YouTube videos, because it just gives me this outlet to just talk about the things I want to talk about. And I know it's not the best use of my time really, but I like it and I enjoy it, and it makes me feel fulfilled. So, I'm very happy to do it. But there's a great book that I'd recommend for anybody who's in this situation, or wondering about these things. Perhaps freelancers who are wondering whether they should try and grow what they're doing to something bigger. It's called The Company of One by Paul Jarvis. And it talks about exactly this. It talks about how in our society we've got this kind of, we're always being told to grow and to scale, and there's a kind of, it's our human nature is always to want more and to find safety and security in growth, because it goes back to the days when we were all, where safety in numbers on the Serengeti against all the lions and stuff like that. We are hardwired to want to continue to grow, except that now in the modern world, growth doesn't mean the same thing as it meant 10,000 years ago. And so the whole thrust of the book is that actually you can be this company of one, as he calls it, and be completely satisfied and content with with something that's on the smaller side, and actually and then define your own success to be that. And his argument is that it makes for a much happier, more relaxed life. And I have to say, I buy into that.
Yeah, I think I'd buy into that as well. It's what is success for you? What does it mean? How will you know when you're successful? If that just means that you have enough to eat and you're doing things that really satisfy you and bring you joy and make you a good citizen and things like that, then that's success. You don't need to be big.
This
That's what I'm going to go and tell my advisors after this. So
this not to get too far away from language learning, obviously, but this is also a big a topic that's important for people, because I think with the internet and with YouTube and things like that, it's very easy for people to compare themselves to others who are learning all these languages. Just the other day, I released a video, a tribute to a polyglot called Moses McCormack, who passed away recently, and he spoke over 50 languages. Absolute genius. But one of the kind of conclusions from that was that you don't have to learn 50 languages. You can just learn one language and be perfectly happy with that. And I think it's so important for us to understand what languages mean for us in our lives, and what why we're learning, and to really try hard not to compare ourselves with other people.
Yeah, I think the motivation for learning a language, you really need to figure out what is your motivation. Do you just want to be able to chat with your friends and your neighbors, talk with the neighbor's kid about Minecraft, I don't know, that kind of stuff, or do you want to be perfect? And if you just want to be able to chat with your mates and stuff, then you might not need to know all the teeny tiny nitty gritty. You just need to be able to bash it out, and be understood and enjoy it and get out there and use it, and don't just get hung up on trying to refine things endlessly. You don't need to be big. You just need to be satisfied and enjoy it.
Yeah,
I think.
Indeed. What are some of the ways, taking it right back to stories here? Because I really love the fact that on your websites you have not only great stories, but also fantastic illustrations, but also the audio that comes with that as well, and it's kind of a complete package of things.
We have video now too. Ooh, yep.
Oh right, okay. Fantastic, yeah. So even better, like a whole other dimension to it, because this makes it so much more engaging on different levels, and to people with different learning styles as well. So what are some of the ways that people can work with the stories that you have in order to help them learn their languages?
Well, the great thing about having the text and the translations and the audio and the video is that it means you can use it kind of regardless of what your level is. So a way that I recommend, particularly if you're quite new to the language, is just to listen. Oh, okay. First step, take it right back. Become familiar with the story that you're going to be learning. So we've got English versions of our stories on the website that you can read through, you can watch the video, you can listen to the audio. Get really familiar with the story. And I know it's going to be like spoilers, but when you come to listen to the audio in the target language, you're going to know what's going on. And this is basically how I use them, because I will listen to the stories hundreds of times while I'm editing the audio or while I'm putting together the video. And I'm doing this without looking at the text of the story at all. And so I listen to the story over and over and over again, and I kind of internalize these words, and I know exactly what is going on, even if I don't necessarily know every single word. And then I come to put the subtitles in or put the text into the page, and I'm suddenly looking at the words. I'm like, oh, that's how that's written. Oh, that's how that's spelled. Oh, French. Wow, that's so much more letters than I was expecting. And I think because I've listened to the story and I know the story so well, it makes it a lot easier to understand the text when it comes along, and it's not, so awkward. It also, I think, helps with my pronunciation, because I haven't been looking at the text. I haven't internalized this English expectation of how it's going to be pronounced, which will then mutilate my pronunciation when I actually come to do it. So I've kind of internalized the French or the Spanish or the German or whatever. I recommend listening or watching the video without the text if you're quite new. If you have a bit more language under your belt, or once you've done that, then you can read it with the text. You can use the little translations that are underneath if you need explanation, but you'll probably understand what is going on anyway. And it's kind of just, you'll be able to follow through the story. It's fantastic for your motivation and your enthusiasticness. No, what's the word? Enthusiasm. That's the word. Because you'll feel like a hero. You will understand this whole story, even though you in any other context, you might not understand all the words, but it's just really great for building up your confidence. If you've got a bit more of the language under your belt, you can, of course, read the texts through extensive reading. You could try to, listen to the audio and figure, you can use it any way you want, but there's just so many different ways you can use the material, because we've provided all those different ways of consuming it.
So what do you for you? What are the key ways that these stories will be used at different levels? And what are the key things to bear in mind if someone's coming at a story at a beginner level or at a more advanced level?
I think if you're coming at it from a beginner level, understand that you're not going to understand all the words, and have that mindset in place, and just focus on listening to the pronunciation, the cadence of the language. You'll probably pick up a few words and phrases. You'll feel like a hero. It'll be great. If you're more
Being happy
advanced,
with that
okay.
without complete understanding, then happy with.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, because they're familiar fairy tales, you'll probably understand the general gist of what is going on. It's just about enjoying it, getting through it, and enjoying the story, and possibly doing it multiple times as well, I recommend. If you are more advanced, you probably want to read it through, find things that you don't quite understand, go off and research those. One thing that I find quite useful, even if you're not if you're not super, so if you're super diligent, what you'll do is you'll go through the story, you'll find things that you don't understand, you'll go off and research that thing, come back to the story. Okay, it makes sense. Sweet. If you're not super diligent and motivated like that, you will still be exposed to language and constructions that you haven't seen before. When you come to do a lesson, or I don't know, learn about that stuff in some other place, it will have meaning for you that it wouldn't have had otherwise. I find that learning the grammar stuff in a vacuum doesn't work for me. But if I've already seen that material in a story, I'm suddenly a bit more curious. It has more like real world application for me. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm.
No, I mean another way to put that, I think, is that stories, what they do is they let you see how what learning with stories does is it gives you the ability to learn grammar in a different order, learn grammar after the fact. So you can read something, get curious about what grammar is, and then go and look it up as you need it, almost like just in time learning, as opposed to the way that most traditional language learning programs work, which is, hey, let's learn every single grammar point one by one, and then later we'll see how it's actually used.
And I feel like that's how some people approach language, and they feel like they can't dive into the language properly until they understand all the rules, because they just won't get it. But I think you should just dive in first, and then you'll have all this curiosity to fuel your research and your study later, and it'll all have just so much more meaning for you than it would otherwise.
Indeed, yeah. Well, these are words of wisdom that the listeners of this podcast will need no convincing about whatsoever. So it's been an absolute joy to speak with you and to find out more about you and about your prolific work. So we're going to tell people where to find out more about what you've got. So we're going to give a long list of websites, I think. So would you like to direct people to?
Fantastic.
Where should people go to check out what you've been up to?
Well, I think you should start with the best first, which would be thefablecottage.com. That is the one that I'm currently working on. My other language websites, the very, very first one, you can even hear the audio recorded by my lovely Belgian friend, and it's very precise glory, is thefrenchexperiment.com. We have the italianexperiment.com, we have the spanishexperiment.com, and we have the germanproject.com.
Wonderful. Are you a social media person at all? If people want to connect with you, is there a way for them to do that?
You can follow the Fable Cottage on Facebook, but I'm not very prolific with my social media, I'm afraid.
You're happy in the background. I think it's a good place to be. Judging by the volume of my inbox and the number of unread messages, I'd probably quite like to trade with you. So yeah, well, listen, thank you so much, and we'll have to have you back on again next time, maybe for the Chinese project and the Japanese experiments or whatever. Whenever it
actually started, but anyway, we won't talk about that. All right, lovely to be here, Ollie. Thank you for chatting.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. And here at Story Learning, everything that I do is powered by stories, whether that's writing books, teaching lessons, crafting courses. My mission is to help everyone succeed at learning a new language through the power of story. And we now have comprehensive language courses in over 15 languages, from Spanish to French, Korean to Japanese, and across all levels from beginner to mastery. And you can take a 7-day free trial of any of these programs by visiting storylearning.com/courses. I've poured my heart and soul soul into creating these courses over the last 10 or so years, and we've helped tens of thousands of new students achieve their dreams of learning a new language, all through the power of story. So go ahead and take a free trial. There's no commitment. You can try out our method for free. See if this can also be the breakthrough for you that it's been for so many other people. StoryLearning.com/courses.